Mic test 1 2 1 2. Mic test 1 2 1 2. 1 2 1 2.
Check 1 2. Okay, I'm standing in front of the camera. Should be able to see me now. Checking 1 2 1 2 1 2. Checking 1 2. We're here live. This is a test. 1 2. Check 1 2. We're doing a visual check, an audio check.
If I could have the candidates come and take your seats, please. And I'm going to ask Mr. Craig Liccardi if he would come up and open us in a word of prayer. Grassroots America, We the People PAC, opens all of its meetings with prayer and with pledges to the American and the Texas flag. So, Mr. Liccardi.
Would you bow your head with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this awesome night that we can come together. We thank you for getting us here safely. We pray for those who maybe couldn't get out in this weather. We pray that they'll be able to take part in this online as it's being live streamed and everything. And God, we just pray that tonight that your will would be done, that your truth, the truth of everything would come out. Lord God, we pray that you would grant the two candidates here, God, the strength of character and the power of your Holy Spirit, Lord, that there would be no incivility, God, but that your truth would come out, and that at the end of this time tonight, Lord God, we would know, we would be able to discern through the power of your Holy Spirit who is the absolute best candidate for this position. We pray that you would just help us tonight, let all the answers be truthful, and God, we just ask you to bless these proceedings and bless the candidates. We ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, welcome to everybody that's here tonight joining us live and in person. And we welcome all of our friends, supporters, and newcomers on Facebook. You know, Grassroots America looks at every candidate forum and every interview that we do as a job interview. You know, we don't believe that elected officials are a different, higher class from the folks who pay the freight, the taxpayers. And we don't believe that we coronate anyone for office, but that every candidate should be open to being questioned and to being asked how they could do the job and how best they would do the job if the voters of Texas decide to hire them at the ballot box. So now we're going to go over the rules for tonight. And I want to start with the audience. I'm sure the audience knows all about good manners and decorum, but I'll go over them anyway. You are welcome to applaud, but we won't allow anyone to yell at the candidates. If you feel like yelling, you just have to go outside and do it, because we don't allow y'all to yell at the candidates. And I did have them check for rotten tomatoes at the door, so I know you didn't bring any of those in. This is not a place for rude sandbox behavior. We just simply won't put up with it. And I do have some plainclothes security people on site, so don't make them do their jobs, please. Please silence your phones, and if you have a pager, silence that also. If you get a call, I got to remind you, please exit the room before you start talking on the phone. It's difficult for candidates, even though Mr. Miller is a seasoned candidate. It is difficult sometimes to keep your train of thought if somebody is talking on the phone or talking loudly to each other. So please give them your courtesy and respect tonight. No candidate or campaign staffer has seen these questions. In fact, nobody has seen the questions but me. Candidates may stand or remain seated to give opening and closing statements. Candidates were given the time limits and the order of the program in advance. Candidates may use paper during the debate for note-taking. Candidates may not send or receive text during the debate, nor ask for assistance from campaign supporters or staff. You may ask, why would she possibly have to say that? Because in 26 years of being a conservative activist, I've seen just about every trick in the book. Candidates may use charts, graphs, or appropriate props to help them make their points during closing statements. Candidates should spend time debating the topics as posed by the moderator. Attempts to change the subject will trigger corrective action by the moderator. This is a modified Lincoln-Douglas format. The debate will begin with 2-minute opening statements by each candidate. And we are going to go in alphabetical order to open and reverse order to close. The debate, as I said, is a modified Lincoln-Douglas. Now, normally, I will use 4 15-minute quarters. Based on these gentlemen's answers and how fully they answer the question, we may reduce it to 10 minutes because we don't want you talking about something that you've already covered. We're not here to burn time. We're here to get some answers from you guys. And the candidates then will have 3 minutes each to close in the reverse order. During the close, candidates may include a rebuttal or finish an important point they were unable to complete during the debate period. Extra time will not be allowed for candidates to trade barbs. When the 3 minutes are up, at the end, they are really up. So if the discussion topics are completed in less amount of time, the moderator reserves the right to adjust the time. I hope everybody gets that. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, Grassroots America recommended Mr. Sid Miller for Ag Commissioner in the 2014 Republican Party primary. Mr. Trey Blocker interviewed me for his podcast in August last year. Neither Mr. Miller nor Mr. Blocker are contributors to Grassroots America, We the People PAC. Now, gentlemen, it is time to start, Mr. Timekeeper. We will have 2 minutes opening statements for each. Gentlemen, Mr. Licardi here will hold up the yellow when you are 30 seconds away from needing to land the plane. Then when he holds up the red stop sign, you really need to just finish that sentence. Don't start a new paragraph, okay? All right. So now, Mr. Blocker, you will begin with your opening statement, please. And you may just stay right there, remain right there. You don't need to take the podium. Right there will be fine.
Thank you very much, and thank you, East Texas. I appreciate you all being here, and thank you, Joanne Fleming and Grassroots America, We the People, for hosting this debate. This is what democracy is about. My name's Trey Blocker. I'm running to be your next Agriculture Commissioner of the state of Texas. I am a 6th-generation Texan. My forefathers came here in the mid-1800s and were among some of the most well-respected cattlemen of their day. I'm proud of this heritage, and it's for this reason I believe agriculture and rural Texas should be preserved and protected and promoted. For the past decade, I've been doing missionary work in the People's Republic of Austin as an ethics attorney and a lobbyist for various ag organizations, Fortune 100 companies, and conservative leaders like Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Last year, I decided to quit this career because I am sick and tired of the corruption and the crony capitalism that I have witnessed in Austin. I am running for this office because I want to restore honesty, integrity, and fiscal responsibility to the Department of Agriculture. Folks, the sad fact is we can't trust Sid Miller to govern as a conservative anymore. We can't trust him to keep taxes low. We can't trust him to keep government small. And as I have found out over the last few weeks, we can't trust him to tell the truth either. So I'd like for you to do something for me tonight. If you'll take out your smartphones, go to can'ttrustsid.com. That's can'ttrustsid.com. I want you to fact check every comment I make this evening and his responses as well. On that website, you will find background material for everything that I say, and you can decide what's the truth and what's not. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm looking forward to this debate, and I'm looking forward to earning your support. Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Well, good evening, Patriots. I'm your Texas Agriculture Commissioner. I'm the 8th generation farmer and rancher. I still make my living off the land in Stephenville, Texas. So the basic stuff you need to know about me. I am pro-life, pro-God, pro-gun, pro-family, pro-business, pro-constitution, pro-Israel, and pro-President Donald J. Trump. Now, as your Agriculture Commissioner, we've been working real hard for you to make the agency more efficient and run a lot smoother on a lot less dollars, and we've done that. When I took over, the agency was $18 million in the red. It was taking over 8 years to service all the fuel pumps in the state. Our organic program was a 2.5-year backlog. I have those pumps inspected now every 24 months. We've added a skimmer protection program. That's the crooks that steal your credit card information. We're looking out for you there. And I'm doing it with 16 less inspectors. I've cut the agency back. That organic program, we got it fixed in 90 days, and the train's been running on time ever since. I soon found out, because the agency was not well funded, that there was a lot of businesses operating illegally across the state. So I launched Operation Maverick, and we went up and rounded those guys up, got them legal. Over 7,000 of those were operating illegal on illegal scales across the state. So now they're all in compliance. We're in charge of 5 million school meals each day, so we're making the school lunchroom great again. Before I came commissioner, instead of having healthy kids, we had healthy trash cans. We're turning that around. I did away with all the mandates that the Texas Department of Agriculture had put on our schools, and we're working with our schools using the carrot instead of the stick to make those lunchrooms great again. And maybe I'll get to tell you about that a little later. So it's good to be with you tonight. I'm looking forward to a spirited debate and getting the truth out there and getting on with the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, this first question is for you, and as I've indicated to your campaign teams, that I want you all to have a free exchange of factual information, disagreement, but we're not going to have a food fight. We're not going to talk over each other. So I don't want to have to interrupt at all. So if you all can just use fair debate rules, not the Fox News debate rules now, but fair debate rules and a modicum of courtesy, then I think that everybody can be heard. So, Mr. Miller, let's just jump right into it, okay?
Sure.
A report by the State Auditor's Office says that you hiked fees on Texas farmers and ranchers that raised millions more than needed. Those fees generated $27.3 million during the 2016 calendar year, while programs relying on those fees cost $20.8 million to operate, which means that your agency collected $6.5 million more than necessary to operate, or 31% over. The state audit also said, quote, as of March 17, 2017, the department had not compared its actual revenues and expenditures to evaluate whether it set its fees appropriately, close quotes. The Texas Agriculture Code requires you to set fees, quote, in an amount which offsets, when feasible, the direct and indirect state cost of administering your regulatory activities, close quote. When we looked at the fees, we found renewing a grain warehouse license, for instance, now costs $500, up from $235. And prices for field inspections to certify seeds increased anywhere from a few cents to more than $1 per acre. Mr. Miller, please explain the methodology your agency used to calculate those fees and how you justify raising $6.5 million more than necessary to run those programs.
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. What that report did not say is that we raised the fees in an exorbitant amount. We actually hit those fees right on the money, just like we had predicted. We did have an excess of funds in the account, but that came from the savings that I mentioned some of them earlier. You know, we that organic program, we got all those guys registered and on time and up to snuff, so we had all that extra money come in from the organic program. I reorganized the inspectors and their department. I fired the logistics team, which saved the agency $300,000, and because through my reorganization, we're driving 1.5 million miles less. That's a huge savings for the agency. And we're getting 40 to 60% more inspections done. I mentioned that I eliminated 16 inspectors when I did that. That's over $1 million in savings right there in salary cost, in labor burden, and retirees' cost. I mentioned I launched Operation Maverick, where we registered over 7,000 devices in the state. That was all new income to the state where it hadn't been calculated in the budgets before. So you're right, we had about 35%, what'd you say, 31% more income than we needed, but it didn't come from overestimating the fees. It came from efficiencies that we had instilled in the department. What you have to realize, before, when I came in, we were $18 million in the red. That's why we couldn't get all the pumps inspected. That's why we didn't have everybody registered. What was happening before, the legislature would fund the Department of Agriculture 50% from the fee for services we provide, and the other 50% came from you, the taxpayer. Okay? You were subsidizing the farmers' pesticide license. You were subsidizing HEB and Buc-ee's and everybody else that we provide services to. What I've done is level that up. Now those people that we provide those services to are paying 100% of their costs. We are now a pay-as-you-go agency. We don't use taxpayer dollars. If we provide a service to HEB or Buc-ee's, we collect the money from them and not you. So that was a very hard thing to do for my previous predecessors. They didn't want to raise fees, but I think it was a conservative thing to do. I think it shows leadership to have the courage to do that and take the burden off you, the taxpayer. In my view, as a conservative, you shouldn't be paying half the cost of Valero's or Stripes or a pesticide or a grain warehouse operator. And that's, you know, you said went from $250 to $500. That's about right on that one. Some of these fees hadn't been raised in 25 years. They were way out of line. They were nowhere near covering the cost of those programs. We went in and did a lengthy study. It took us 3 months to calculate the cost of what each one of those fees was. We brought in the industry, each industry, sat down with them, explained what we were doing. We gave them our cost analysis, and we gave them 45 days for comments to show if we'd made any mistakes or not. You know how many comments we got? 0. None. 0. So we felt pretty good about going into that, and sure enough, the audit, and I'm glad we had the audit because it kind of proves up where we were, but this agency was so bad. When I took over as commissioner, I called up the state auditor and asked for him to come audit my agency. He said, "You got to be crazy. No one's ever asked to be audited." But I did. I wanted to benchmark to see where we were, and it was a good thing we did. We had a lot of contract discrepancies that we were able to catch and fix before they became a problem, and some other things we headed off. So I felt pretty good about that. Very open and transparent in all of our dealings and all of our fee increases and things like that. But thank goodness you are not subsidizing the industry anymore. They're paying their own way.
Okay,
Thank
Mr. Miller, before Mr. Blocker jumps in, let me ask you one clarifying question. Did you do an operational analysis?
We did.
Before you set the fees. So are you saying tonight that you all did a full-scale operational analysis of the Agriculture Commission and the portions of those agencies that these fees are directed to in order to figure out exactly how much you should charge in fees? Did you do the operational analysis first to see if your agency was as lean and effective in its services before you calculated the fees?
Yes, I'd mentioned that in my answer. It took us 3 months. And the reason it took us so long, we didn't have very good historical data from the previous administration. They just didn't leave us much. So when it come to doing the cost of fuel, we just had to go back and average 3 years of cost of fuel. And we didn't actually have what they had spent.
Okay.
They didn't keep up with it. So we did the tools that we had, like I said, it took us 3 months. And then, just to make sure we got another set of eyes on it, we opened it up to the industry and told them we've got it. Come look at it. As a matter of fact, I didn't bring one, but I can furnish you the whole analysis. We put it in book form for each strategy, where it would be eggs or fuel or grain warehouses or any of that. It's all there, and it shows how we, step by step, came to the conclusion what it would take to run the agency at no cost to the taxpayer.
Okay, so for the benefit of the public that are watching online and those here, would you, while I appreciate your offering it to me, would you make sure if it's not posted online and when I looked for it, and it could be my mistake, I just might not have seen it there, but would you have your agency post that study online?
It's quite lengthy. We can post it. It's a book. It was pretty thick.
Sure. Okay.
We make it available to anyone that wants one. I don't know about putting it online I'll check on that. If we can, we'll do it.
You know what? I bet you have technical people that can probably figure
Okay.
that out.
We can do that.
I suspect so. Mr. Blocker, are you ready to respond?
Sure. Where to start? First of all, I think Todd Staples was one of the greatest ag commissioners the state of Texas has ever seen. And my opponent blaming him for all of his problems is just sad, in my opinion. To say that the department was $18 million in the red is just not true. This is not the United States government. We do not do deficit spending in the state of Texas. The way Texas works is the legislature allocates money, and you only get to spend what they allocate. We don't debt spend in the state of Texas. The fees. The audit report showed that these fees were raised in amounts by as much as 500% on farmers, ranchers, grocers, and other small businesses across the state of Texas. The audit said that the department did not show the methodology that they used to raise these fees, nor did they keep records to determine what it cost to run the programs so that at the end of the day, they could show if they had raised the fees too high, not enough, or just right. The audit report went on to say that the fees generated close to $7 million more than was allowed by law and $7 million more than was needed to run these programs. In my opinion, this is tantamount to theft. This money should have stayed in the pockets of the hardworking Texans who actually earned it. And let's back up just a little bit. Why did these fees get raised to begin with? Right after my opponent took office, he asked the legislature for an additional $50 million to his budget. This represented a 50% increase. Our very conservative legislature told him no, live within your means. And his response was to raise fees. If you and your family are having bad budgetary times and you only have so much to live on, do you cut spending and live within your means, or do you go pick your neighbor's pocket? Well, that's what this amounted to, is picking the pockets of your neighbors across Texas.
Let me respond to that.
Yes.
I'm not done just yet.
Okay.
When he proposed these fees, the House of Representatives, over half of the House members, told him do not raise fees. Our lieutenant governor, on behalf of himself and the Senate, said do not raise fees. The Texas Farm Bureau said do not raise fees. And he did it anyway. This is not conservative governance, in my opinion.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
Well, several inaccuracies in Mr. Blocker's statement there. He said that we raise fees over 500%. That is simply not true. A case egg inspection went from, it was raised a penny, from 5 cents to 6 cents. Fuel pumps went from $28 to $31. He's using an extreme example on a pesticide license where the department prior was only charging $12 for a county employee's pesticide license. Now, to run that program, it cost us $140 per license to run that. We didn't raise it to $140. We did raise it to $75. Probably should have raised it to 140, but we thought that was, we could probably live with that. So that's the one example that he pulls out of hundreds and hundreds. We didn't break any laws by raising more money. Matter of fact, I've never had a business that I tried to break even or lose money on. We'd always like to end up in the black. So and keep this in mind. This agency is a $6 billion agency. So $7 million will run us for about 7 hours. That's less than 0.1%. So that's actually cutting it pretty close. Now, the $7 million, what he doesn't tell you is, we are taking that money and we're doing the same thing we did, Joanne, when we raised the fees. We're going back through and recalculating those costs because we have better numbers now. And we're giving that money back to those farmers that do pesticide license, to those businesses, and we're in the process of lowering fees. Now, I could have done that before the election and tried to look like I was all that great and everything, but we don't work that way at the Ag Department. We are taking our time and we're doing it right, and it will probably be this summer before we release those. But I can assure you that maybe not all of them, but most of them, we're either going to rebate those fees back to the farmers and the businesses, or we'll just lower the fee across the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question, we'll start out with Mr. Blocker. And this has two parts. Part one. Mr. Miller alleges that you officed with Texas House Speaker Joe Straus, former Chief of Staff, and his former Legislative Director at Davis Kaufman PLLC.
I didn't make that accusation.
Your staff sent that to me, Mr. Miller, in an email.
Yeah. Okay.
Describe that relationship, Mr. Blocker. And then part two, please explain your contributions to the Texas Democratic Party and contributions you made to Democratic state senators. So now, Mr. Liccardi, I'm looking, and it's 7 o'clock. We're going to give this segment 10 minutes. And so, Mr. Blocker, you begin, please, answering.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for the question. I did at one point office with another law firm called Davis Kaufman, and office with them for a few years. I'm not sure what relevance that has to this position or my electability. As for the contributions, as I said, I have been doing missionary work in the People's Republic of Austin for the last decade as a lobbyist for various ag groups, other companies. And as a part of that business, I have contributed to both parties. Over the past 10 years, 80% of my contributions have gone to Republicans. My opponent has made this accusation several times and tried to call me a Democrat because of it. Our president, Donald Trump, has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Democrats over the years, and I've never heard my opponent call Mr. Trump a Democrat. This is simply a tactic on his behalf to divert attention away from his horrible track record as commissioner over the past 3 years. And if we're trying to use contributions as a litmus test for our beliefs, then it's also worth pointing out that over the past 10 years, I've given 1,000 times more dollars to Republicans and Republican causes than my opponent has.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Well, lobbyists dole out money for special favors. I'm not a lobbyist. He's right. He's probably given a lot more money to politicians than I have. Donald Trump gives some money to some Democrats, and you give a lot of money to Democrats, but here's the difference. We might even let it slide. He didn't give $2,500 to the Democrat Party to start the legislative session so they could use that to fight the Sanctuary Cities bill. Donald Trump has never voted in the Democrat primary like you, Trey. And he is not a political consultant to numerous Democrat legislators in the House who keep us, that keeps good conservative Republicans from winning those seats. You're helping the other side. There's no running from that. So I don't know whether y'all know this or not, but I know Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a friend of mine, and Trey Blocker is no Donald Trump.
That's original.
Okay.
Can I respond to that? I mean, there were
Yes,
several
yes,
thoughts in
you
there.
have some time left.
Great. So let me tell you one thing. If you do not want to vote for a former lobbyist in this race, then you can't vote for either of these two people sitting at this table, because my opponent was also a lobbyist at one point in his career. And let's talk about my credentials as a conservative. I was born and raised in a conservative Christian household. I went to a small college in Virginia called Hampden-Sydney, which was founded in 1776. Patrick Henry was on the original board of directors. I don't know who doesn't get chills up their spine when you read his speech about give me liberty or give me death. My first foray into politics was as a volunteer for Oliver North's campaign against a liberal Democrat in Virginia. I then came to Austin to go to law school and worked for 3 very conservative members of the Texas legislature. And in my 3rd year of law school with one of these legislators, a good friend of my opponent's named Susanna Hupp, we formed the Civil Liberties Defense Foundation in 1999 to defend the Second Amendment from 31 liberal mayors who were trying to take your guns away from you. Today, we are using CLDF to sue sanctuary cities and restore law and order to our cities and make our communities safe again. So does that sound like something a Democrat would do? I'll let you decide.
I need to respond to that. He accused me of being a lobbyist.
Yes, sir.
Let me tell you, I served in the legislature for 12 years. I was chairman of Homeland Security and Public Safety and worked with Rick Perry to secure the Texas border, and we did that. Had oversight over the Texas Rangers. I served as chairman of the House Agriculture and Livestock Committee and chairman of the Republican Caucus. When I left, I had no intentions of being a lobbyist. The people that I'd been helping all those 12 years called me up and said, hey, could you help us with a few items down here? I said, well, they're my friends, like Texas Right to Life was one of them, a couple of agriculture groups. And so I helped them. When the session's over, I went back to the farm and got on my horse and farmed and raised cattle, and that was pretty much the extent of it. Now, Trey, he doesn't tell you who he lobbies for, but he lobbies for big tobacco, the liquor industry, gambling, payday loans, Monsanto, and a whole host of other lower type, what I call low-level lobbying. So if he's trying to make us a comparison, there's just absolutely no comparison in that. Thank you.
There is no comparison. I've run a successful business, and I'm proud of every client that I've ever represented, and I've never represented a client that I didn't believe in from a free market principled standpoint, and I would represent all of those companies today, whether it be AT&T or Walmart or the cattle raisers or the Forestry Association or the Catfish Institute. You know, let's talk about what a lobbyist is. A lobbyist is someone that you all hire to protect your interest from politicians. That's what a lobbyist is. Anybody in here a member of Farm Bureau? If you raise your hand. Anybody a member of the Cattle Raisers Association? Keep your hands up if you don't mind. Any teachers in here? Any volunteer firefighters? Any members of the NRA? All of you have lobbyists fighting for you, fighting to protect your rights in Washington, D.C. and Austin from politicians like the one sitting next to me. And why? Because not all of us have the time to go to D.C. or to go to Austin to defend our rights. And that's why we need folks who can go and do that on our behalf. So I'm very proud of what I've done for the past 10 years.
Okay. All right.
Now respond to that one.
Okay, this is the last back and forth on this one because we have some substantive issues we need to get to.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Well, I did leave out one of the people he lobbies for, and that's Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, you know, who supports Planned Parenthood and who actually had a carve-out special interest bill in the last legislative session, which really upset all the Tea Parties. As a matter of fact, here's a letter with Joanne's name right at the top of it. Grassroots American is signed by every Tea Party in the state, urging the legislature not to support Mr. Blocker's client, Mr. Buffett. So just thought I'd bring that with you tonight and Sorry I left that one out. I thought it was important enough to bring it back.
Okay, well, that's okay. I just want to make sure that everybody is clear that this letter is not about telling Mr. Blocker who he should or should not represent.
Right.
That's not our business. Our business was trying to kill a bad bill, and we did. Okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Blocker was the lobbyist for the bad bill.
Okay. Mr. Miller, identify the greatest challenge to prosperity and sustainability for Texas farmers and ranchers, and identify the statutory authority your office has to improve their chances of survival and what you've done since you've been Ag Commissioner to achieve measurable results.
Be glad to do that. When I first took office, without a doubt, the biggest threat to the farmer and rancher, not just Texas, but across this great nation, was an overreaching federal government. I sued the Corps of Engineers. I sued the EPA over waters of the U.S. because of the erroneous rules that they were trying to implement that would shut down agriculture. And I still believe this day that that was their intent. I was fighting the Bureau of Land Management up here on the Red River. They were trying to seize 90,000 acres of farm and ranch land. They'd been those families for 100 years or more and not pay them 1 red cent for it. No compensation, zero. Take it off the tax rolls. So those school districts and counties up there would not have that tax income. I was fighting the Fish and Wildlife Service. I was fighting the Endangered Species Act. I probably spent 30 to 40% of my time, and my legal staff probably spent more than that, fighting against our federal government. And that's a crying shame. And then on November 8th, Donald Trump got elected. And that all stopped, thank goodness. I was fortunate enough to work on Donald Trump's campaign. I formed his Agriculture Advisory Committee. I was a surrogate speaker for him, campaigned for him, got on the campaign calls every morning. And then after the election, I got a call that he wanted me to come to Mar-a-Lago and interview for a cabinet position, specifically Secretary of Agriculture. Now, they went with Sonny Perdue on that. I think when they got to the background check and found out that Ted Nugent was my treasurer, they saw that one fact alone is enough to keep you from getting the nomination. So anyway, the difference now is I have a direct line of communication, and still I'm an advisory council to the administration. We, contact each other, 2 or 3 times a week, mostly by email, and was honored to be that. But we have a total over 130 statutory functions that we're to perform, working with the federal government and the liaison between us and the USDA. About 9 out of $10 that we operate our agency with comes from the USDA. So we have a statutory authority to do that, but we do a whole host of things that probably no one in here would even know we do. We do, weights and measures, consumer protection. We do all the scales, barcode scanners, fuel pumps. We certify the lottery balls. All by law, we have to do that. We have performance measures. We're over all the pesticides in the state, the grain warehouses. We have a bank where we guarantee small loans and operating loans for beginning farmers to get them started into agriculture. We have the Office of Rural Health Care. I'm in charge of rural health care for 177 counties. We run 12 of the 14 USDA nutritional programs and all the state programs. Things like I've already mentioned the school lunch program where we oversee 5 million school meals each day, school breakfast, but other things like summer feeding programs, adult feeding programs, Meals on Wheels, working with area food banks, food pantries, things like that, make sure they're supplied. We're part of the emergency management response team for the state. We, Hurricane Harvey and the fires up here, we respond and do the animal end of it. We set up 74 animal shelters during Hurricane Harvey. But we also were the ones that supply all the food for the shelters across the state. We release all the USDA commodities. We run the export facilities for the livestock. We have 4 on the Rio Grande. We have 1 at the airport in Houston at Hobby. We are the marketing agency for the state. We're basically the Chamber of Commerce. I have amped that up when we have a good program called the Go Texan program, and it's to market Texas agriculture products, mostly help mom and pop businesses get into HEB or on Amazon. But when I took over, I instituted a global outreach initiative. We were on every continent on the globe marketing Texas agriculture products and Texas. It's been very, very successful. I got the ball rolling and instituted the talks in China. I spent 11 days there myself, met with 18 different communist officials to get U.S. beef back into China. They hadn't bought any beef from us in 14 years. And last June, we made our first shipment of U.S. beef to China. I've been to Israel. Just got back from Germany. It's been very successful. We'll host over 25 Central and South American countries during the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. We've been very successful in Central and South America on animal genetics, so successful that I have an office and one employee permanently stationed in Argentina, marketing Texas agriculture products and sending our products down there. There's a whole host of things. I won't kill the whole night going on about the others, but I want you to get an idea of the size and scope. We're just a lot more than plows and sows and cows at the Texas Department of Agriculture.
Okay, Mr. Blocker, before you interject, Mr. Miller, so let me be specific in asking you for a measurement. One of the things you mentioned was your global initiative. So to give Texas producers access to more markets.
Foreign markets.
Could you quantify what percentage, and would you rank them according to their size? Are these big ag operations? Are they small mom and pop? So give us a little more detail in measurements on that, please.
Well, the beef producer, just going to China's is 1.4 billion people, 1,400,000,000 people. If they ate 1 quarter-pound hamburger, that's 400 million pounds of beef. That's huge. We visited 13 countries in North Africa. Sudan. I don't know that Texans ever been to Sudan and tried to sell them anything. They're buying 5,000 head of dairy cattle. 25,000 head of dairy cattle, 5,000 head a year for 5 years. We just inked a deal in Argentina to send 1,000 Wagyu embryos. That's the Kobe beef embryos. $1,000 a pop. So every dollar we spend, we bring back somewhere between $60 and $80 in revenue for the state and for our producers.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Blocker.
So it's probably clear to you now, but I think the biggest threat facing farmers and ranchers in Texas are the fees and the bloated bureaucracy at this agency. And let's talk about the bureaucracy. There are a lot of things that the Department of Agriculture does that, in my opinion, it shouldn't do. I want to make the Department of Agriculture about agriculture again. I don't think TDA should be in the business of regulating scales at Starbucks or weighing lottery balls or harassing barbecue restaurants, which the current administration has been doing. There are a lot of programs at TDA that could be moved to other agencies and done in a much more cost-effective, efficient manner without a political agenda. Now let's talk about the school lunch program. This is a program that is fraught with fraud, waste, and abuse, and would be much better served at the Health and Human Services Commission. There's another thing that I think is facing as a threat to farmers and ranchers, and that's natural disasters, whether it's a flood in southeast Texas or fires up in the Panhandle. This is something that we have to help farmers and ranchers on, and part of that is protecting them, which is why I'm glad to have the endorsement of the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association. It is my intention to work with volunteer firefighters to make sure that our ag producers are protected from wildfires. I would also point out that Texas farmers and ranchers need an articulate, intelligent voice standing up for them in Washington, D.C. when it comes to immigration reform and negotiating a new deal on NAFTA. We need an articulate, intelligent voice to go to the Texas legislature and fight for property rights and water rights. I've spent 20 years working with Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, most of the legislators in the House and the Senate, and I'm well respected by these folks, unlike my opponent, and I look forward to working with them to improve agriculture in the state of Texas.
Okay, thank you.
Respond to that because
Very briefly, we've got about 30
okay,
seconds.
real briefly. Mr. Blocker seems to think that we don't run a very efficient operation at the Texas Department of Agriculture. I'll give you the facts and you decide. California is the largest agriculture producing state in the United States. I hate to be second to California, but they've got an $80 billion wine industry out there that kind of puts us behind. They have, and they don't do the nutrition programs, and that's $5 billion of the $6 billion we do. California has a little over 2,500 agriculture department employees. The third highest agriculture state is Florida. They actually do the nutritional stuff that we do here in Texas. Florida has a little over 4,500 agriculture department employees. We here at the Texas Department of Agriculture, I think we do it better than either one of those states. And I have 704 employees. Now you decide if we're efficient or not.
Okay. Mr. Blocker, if you were elected agriculture commissioner, what is the most important thing you would do differently than the incumbent? Now, I want you to be specific. I don't want it to be about style and linguistics. It needs to be specific to the people of Texas that you serve. So, what is the most important thing, the one most important thing that you would do differently than the incumbent?
I suspect I've made this pretty clear at this point. I would lower fees on the farmers, ranchers, grocers, and other small businesses regulated by this agency. There is a reason that in this race I have been endorsed by the Texas Association of Manufacturers, by the Texas Restaurant Association, by the Texas Food and Fuel Association, by the Texas Retailers Association, and by the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association. And the reason is all of these organizations represent thousands of businesses across the state of Texas that have suffered under the heavy hand of government under the current administration, and they believe it's time for change.
Okay. Mr. Miller, I have an entirely different question for you. If the people of Texas rehire you at the ballot box, tell us what you would do in your second term that would be good for the farmers and ranchers, and be very specific about some of the initiatives that you would want to do in a second term.
Okay. We're going to continue doing what we've been doing, streamlining government. I already mentioned to you that we're in the process of lowering those fees. And if you notice those associations, those are all businesses, and they're upset with me because I cut their subsidies out. You're not paying half their fees anymore. That didn't go well with them. They kind of liked living off the government paying half their cost. So I'm not surprised if they would endorse him. One of the things that we're going to work on, even more than we've been working on, we hadn't even mentioned it tonight, but I am the first agriculture commissioner for this state that has had water as a top priority. When I took over, the Texas Department of Agriculture had no water department. We didn't even have an employee dedicated to water. Now, rural Texas and agriculture uses over 60% of the water in this state. Somebody needs to be looking out for that. So I implemented a water department. I have one of the best water experts in the state of Texas hired to oversee that. We're engaged with all the regional water planning meetings. I'm working actually with cities and municipalities. They spend millions and millions of dollars each year getting rid of stormwater. I'm the only statewide candidate that's promoting rainwater catchment or rainwater harvesting. You can take that liability and turn it into asset. It's pretty clean water. It doesn't take much to clean it up. You can use it for manufacturing or industry or irrigation or even human consumption. So we're working with a lot of things like that, working on desalinization in West Texas, bringing brackish water online, working with the oil and gas industry so they don't have to use our fresh water, this being so precious. We're out of water in Texas. We're up over 28 million people. We can no longer water ourselves with windmills anymore, folks. We're going to have to be better stewards of what we got, and that's one of the things that we're really going to focus on in the next 4 years.
Okay, Mr. Miller, just a minute, Mr. Blocker. So I need, maybe I misunderstood you. So let me give you my reference first,
Okay.
and then I'll ask the question. As the three-term chairman of the Tea Party Caucus Advisory Committee before we got the Freedom Caucus, one of our biggest debates with members of the legislature was about the water plan. And one of the issues was that every time we tried to tackle a problem in Austin, we set up a new commission, department, agency program. And so the natural resources in Texas actually has about 43 different departments, agencies, and programs to manage natural resources in Texas, of which water is one. So my question to you is, are you saying in order to do your job as Ag Commissioner that you had to add somebody in your office to Nexus to interact with those agencies, or did you set up a different little department in the Ag Commission on water?
In my Texas Agriculture Department, Water Department, we added no FTEs, if that's what you're asking. We added no employees. We did that in-house with current resources. We did not grow the agency. And I'm glad you brought up the Tea Party Caucus down in the Texas House. I was the founder of that in the House, and Dan Patrick was the founder in the Senate. It was very useful to us as the conservatives in the Texas House for that. It was a good move. It's since disbanded, and now it's the Freedom Caucus.
Okay, Mr. Blocker.
Well, this is a typical career politician here who decided to set up his own water department, as he said. And I guess throughout his entire career as a legislator, he had never heard of the Texas Water Development Board, which is tasked by the legislature with drafting the state water plan and implementing the state water plan. And 2 sessions ago, the legislature gave them $2 billion for water infrastructure needs across the state of Texas, including grant programs for rural water conservation. So this is typical of as Representative Larry Gonzalez, who oversees the Appropriations Subcommittee that oversees the Department of Agriculture, referred to Mr. Miller's $50 million budget request as empire building. He just kept wanting to add new program after new program, even though there were already other agencies doing the same work. This is the type of big government republicanism that we do not need in the state of Texas.
Okay, thank you. 30 seconds.
Rebut that, please. Mm-hmm. The Water Development Board is one of the exact reasons that I created the Water Department at the Texas Department of Agriculture. There's three people appointed to that board by the governor. None of them, 0, represent rural Texas. None. Has 0 representation. The first round of that $2 billion that they let out, guess how much went to rural Texas? None. Somebody's got to have your back out there. Somebody's got to be watching for our farmers and ranchers. 0 grants and programs to rural Texas from the Water Development Board. That's a $2 billion. Actually, it's more than that. It's about $8 billion that they're setting on down there. Somebody needs to be watching out for the rural interest across Texas.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Miller, I asked Mr. Blocker a question that your staff sent me a while ago. So now I'm going to ask you one that Mr. Blocker's staff sent me. Would you explain whether or not you violated agency policies by handing out more than $400,000 in staff bonuses, while at the same time you raised fees on farmers, ranchers, grocers, etc.? So, describe how you went about. Well, first of all, did you hand out bonuses? If you did, do you believe you violated agency policies? And if not, cite why not, and then tell us how you went about choosing people in your agency that got the bonuses.
Okay, there is no law, no policy about handing out bonuses. My predecessor did it right before he left. Ken Paxton's done it. It's we try to reward those that have done a good job. My predecessor didn't hand out many bonuses. The only ones he handed out were to those people that were really close to it. When I came to the agency, morale was at an all-time low. So I brought my staff in, and we went through and did employee evaluations. And we had some people there that were just doing nothing but taking up oxygen. And then we had some people that were just absolutely fabulous and outstanding, and we're paying them exactly the same. And I'm a businessman, so I decided we found a little money. $400,000 is not much money in a $6 billion budget. And we stretched that as far as we could, and that went to those people downstairs, out in the across Texas. It didn't go to executive staff, and we rewarded those people. And guess what happened to morale? It shot through the roof. Even those people just taking up oxygen, they started doing something. I probably got that investment back at least tenfold or more. That was one of the best moves that we made, was rewarding those good employees and recognize them for the quality work they did. Now, he said something about, my executive staff. I could not hire the type of executive staff that I needed to run that agency on the salaries that the previous administration was paying. Just couldn't get there. So I brought my people and I said, so how much did the previous administration pay total? What was the total number? And they told me. I said, how many on the executive staff? And they said, 14. I said, okay. How much can I pay them if I just hire 9? They said, well, you can pay them a lot more if you just hire 9. So they gave me that number. And so I'm paying my executive staff a lot more than the previous administration. But overall, I'm paying less than the previous administration. So I was able to get really, really good people in there. And they do a lot more. Those 9 can do as much or more than the 14 did that were there. So that's how I run the agency. I try to run it like a business. Yeah, we didn't violate any law or agency. It's something that's very common done. And I'm sure those of business owners that are in the audience like to reward your good employees at Christmas time or something with a little extra.
Okay, so then let me do a follow-up question. You said that they are doing a better job. Everybody that got a bonus is doing a better job. Is that did I misunderstand?
It's pretty close. I
Okay.
mean, there's probably some that have left that are not there now that have bettered themselves and got another job or something. But, yeah, for the most part, it really lifted employee morale.
Okay, so could you be more specific then in terms of measurable accomplishments? For example, in any performance measures that you have in any
Sure.
of the agencies, can you give us statistics on what they did better and how that yielded results for your agency?
Well, I can start in my legal department. When I got there, we had over 2,000 case backlog. We hadn't carried a case to a SOAR hearing in that whole previous administration. Once those cases got 2 years old, they just threw them out, were never prosecuted. We did that to that legal department because they just had no motivation whatsoever. They got in there and cleaned that up. We have SOAR hearings scheduled twice a month now. We haven't lost any. I don't think we've lost one of those hearings. That 2,000 case backlog has been cleared up. We had a huge backlog in pesticide applications not being processed. They got in there and put their nose to the grindstone and cleaned that up for me. We had that 2.5-year backlog in the organic certification that I had mentioned. Got that cleaned up in 90 days. I mean, they got after it. I was really proud of them. They really pitched in and made good team members, and things ran off. It made a difference. It really did.
Okay. So across the agency then, just to get a better feel for how you manage your staff, have you implemented an evaluation system? I mean, do you, in every facet of the Ag Commission, do you have your frontline managers who are working on, you were talking about cost savings. do you kind of walk us through the business plan approach that your agency may take? Could you describe that?
Well, we have an organizational chart, and I have 5 assistant commissioners, and under them is, their leadership team, and then so on, down, so on, so on. Each employee each year is by its supervisor directly above them. It wouldn't be me. It may not be an assistant commissioner, but the one exactly above them does an employee evaluation, okay? And those employees that their evaluation is maybe not where it needs to be, we work with them and try to encourage them and give them the tools. Maybe they weren't trained for that position. And we try to do a lot of cross-training between, especially in inspectors and things like that, and between IT and finance. So, yeah, we do all of that. We run it like a business. We sure do.
Okay. Now, Mr. Blocker, so given the line of questioning that I had from Mr. Miller, you jump in and define for the audience what maybe something that you would do differently?
Sure. Well, this is interesting because shortly after my opponent took office, he hired his campaign consultant's wife, paid her a 6-figure salary, and I'm not sure what exactly she was qualified to do. He hired a convicted felon and a Democrat out of Oklahoma as his senior staff, and then he gave a bunch of these people bonuses. And this is one of those things I want you to fact check, because I'm not sure I'm going to get this exactly correct either, but if you go to can'ttrustsid.com, you'll find several news articles talking about these bonuses. And in there, it will tell you that 150,000 or so of these $400,000 worth of bonuses violated agency policy that required that there be staff reviews before bonuses were awarded. And keep in mind, these articles will also tell you that this $400,000 in bonuses, and I think it was a little over $400,000, like $423,000 in bonuses, were more than Governor Abbott, Attorney General Paxton, and Comptroller Hager had given to their staff combined. But I want you to fact check that. Take a look at those news articles. And so at the time that he's giving $400,000 in bonuses to his staff, he also spent $100,000 to put new stickers on gas pumps with his name more prominent. And while he's doing this, he's raising fees on farmers, ranchers, grocers, and other small businesses. This is not how I would run the department.
Okay, thank you.
I need to reply to that, please.
Okay.
What he states is just simply not true, which, comes from a Democrat. It's not surprising. But never, since I've been in office, have I ever given any of my executive staff a bonus. They've never gotten one. Anytime we've given those bonuses, it's been to the workers, the people that really run the agency and do all the hard work. Stickers, he says that I did that against the will of in the legislature telling me not to, and made my name bigger, and made the stickers bigger. It's all a whopper.
Okay. Well,
that was mandated by the legislature. Representative Dwayne Bohack passed a bill in 2013 that required us to take the stickers off that we had, replace them with larger stickers that showed the amount of federal tax on diesel, the amount of federal tax on gasoline, the amount of federal tax on, state tax on diesel, state tax on gasoline, and we put a QR code on there so that when you pull up the pump now, you can scan that and see how many violations that station has had. So it's more consumer information. It's truth. It's open government. It's truth in advertising. And when we put all that on there, the sticker got a little bigger. And that's the truth. That is just completely a falsehood.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I have to say that I really hope your executive staff is not going to be really angry with you the way you described it. The bonuses went to the people who really worked.
I pay them good enough. I bought them a Christmas present.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say your executive staff might take umbrage with that.
I bought them a Christmas present. They're
All
fine.
righty then. Okay. Then let's talk about in-state tuition for illegal immigrants.
Oh, good.
Because as we were doing some research, we found with House Bill 1403 from the little small print for the lady here, 77th legislative session, which was in 2001, indicates that you voted for in-state tuition for illegal aliens. So would you do that differently today, or would you just tell us what your mindset was back then?
That was 17 years ago, 2001. There was a bill on the House floor, and to get in-state tuition, and this is before the law, as I recall, it was either you had to be a resident of Texas either it may have been 3 years, but I think it was 2 years, and you had to have graduated from a Texas high school or equivalent. Now, Senator Jane Nelson had added language to that because we figured out, well, that's going to catch all the dreamers or DACA or whatever you want to call them. And Senator Nelson added language to that said, and a U.S. citizen are on the pathway to citizenship. I voted for that. 142 members in the House voted for it. There was one nay vote. Every member of the Senate voted for it. So, and Mr. Blocker, with that time, was chief of staff for a House member. And on his floor report, he recommended that his legislator vote for that. And she did. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Blocker?
Well, let me just say this. That's typical politician speak right there. And a good example of how politicians go to Austin and they do stuff to go along and get along. I did it because everybody else did it. That's not a good answer. And I don't think the people of his district's like that. In fact, that's probably part of the reason that the people of his House district ultimately voted him out of office, because he got to Austin, he became part of the power structure, he became enamored by the power and the money and the influence, and he did stuff that his voters and his constituents didn't want him to do. We need to eliminate any type of magnet that encourages more illegal immigration. In-state tuition for illegal immigrants is a magnet that encourages more illegal immigration. So are sanctuary cities, so are public benefits, and all of these things need to be eliminated so that we put a stop once and for all to illegal immigration. And as for his claim that I recommended to my boss that she vote for this, it's nonsense, and I would love to see the document.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, that House Bill 1403 that was passed then is still law today. Mm-hmm. And before a university can give in-state tuition, that person either has to show that they're a citizen or they're on the pathway to citizenship. It hasn't changed.
Well, actually, Mr. Miller, and we can absolutely, have a friendly disagreement on the facts here. But I will tell you, this is something that we have opposed for a very long time. And I think if you go back, there are plenty of articles that, and if you look at the oversight of that, there's no oversight that anybody has to be on a pathway to citizenship. So there's no oversight to ensure that whatsoever. Okay. So let's talk a little bit, let's pivot a minute and just talk about your philosophy. Because we want to understand how you make your decisions. So the first question on that, we'll start with you, Mr. Miller. Would you identify someone, a historical figure, or a current day statesman that you like the way that they articulate their core beliefs, and someone that you most closely identify with, either a past historical figure or a current day statesman?
Well, I can tell you this. Every morning when I get up, and I always have a cup of coffee and get the sleepy out of my eyes, the first thing I do is open the Holy Bible, and I search the Scriptures, and I spend time in the Scriptures, and then I spend time in prayer. So even when I was in the House, I sat on the north side of the building. Most of those decisions were, you know, black and white, but every once in a while there'd be one of those gray ones. You're just not kind of sure. I would go over there and open that window and look out to a monument there on the north lawn, and it was the Ten Commandments. And I'd say a little prayer, and usually I would get the direction of how I needed to handle a particular situation. So I do seek the Lord's advice and guidance on a daily basis. For his historical figures, one of my, you know, there's lots of good ones. You could go, you know, every Republican says Reagan. I really like Sam Houston. He was an amazing man. Bounced back from adversity time after time. Only man to serve as governor of 2 states, congressman, United States senator, commander of our revolutionary forces, our first president. I admire Sam Houston a lot.
Okay. Mr. Blocker?
You know, this question for me is probably going to be affected by a book that I'm currently reading called The Spiritual Journey of George Washington. And it amazed me, his grace under fire. And on the wall in my living room is the painting of him praying at Valley Forge. And, you know, if you read historical accounts of George Washington during the Revolutionary War, oftentimes his soldiers complained that he prayed too much. I'm not sure there is such a thing, but that's a painting that I look at every day, and it reminds me of the spiritual guidance that our founding fathers sought from our Lord Jesus Christ when they were founding our great nation. And on my podcast, The Trey Blocker Show, every Sunday I post a quote from a founding father about the roots of our great nation, and those roots are in our Judeo-Christian heritage. But for this Christian heritage, we would not have a Declaration of Independence or the Constitution that we have today, or the inalienable rights that are given to us by God, but protected by government. Not given to us by government, given to us by God. And I encourage you to take a look at these quotes. Unfortunately, we live in a time where we have folks on the left arguing that our founding fathers were atheist and deist and that they weren't Christians, and that's complete nonsense. And so I am working hard every day to put faith back in America, and I would hope you would join me in doing that as well.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Blocker, we'll start with you on this question. Would you, the term corporate welfare has been used here tonight, so would you define for us what you believe is intended in the term corporate welfare?
Well, it probably depends who's using it. We, for years in the state of Texas, have had economic development programs that have given grants and awards to attract businesses to the state of Texas. Governor Perry was famous for poaching businesses from California and bringing them to Texas using economic development funds. Governor Abbott has taken a less shiny approach to this. He's not as big of a fan of these economic development funds as was Governor Perry. And a lot of people will label these economic funds as corporate welfare. We live in the greatest state in the Union. I don't think there's anyone here who is going to disagree with that. It's a great place to do business because overall we have low taxes, we have low regulations, and a qualified and educated workforce. I'm not sure we should be giving grants or handouts to any company to encourage them to come to Texas. Let them come to Texas because it's the greatest place in the country to be.
Mr. Miller?
Corporate welfare is just that. And I was talked about this earlier tonight because that's what we had at the Department of Agriculture. It's when the taxpayer is subsidizing and paying the way for a business that is fully capable of paying their own way. We eliminated that at the Department of Agriculture. Those businesses now that we provide services to, they pay their own way, and that's the way it should be. The Department of Agriculture, when it comes to services like that, and the Railroad Commission, we're about the only two that actually pay our own way. We collect the money that it costs to run those programs from the people we provide those services to. So we pretty much ended corporate welfare at the Department of Agriculture.
Okay. Mr. Miller, you've had several run-ins with, I think we could say, with the media. And over at the, but we're not debating the media here tonight. The media is not running for Ag Commissioner, you are. So we want to talk about the facts here. So would you explain to us, you've had a few run-ins that are described as ethical transgressions by paying out of your campaign account or paying out of your Ag Commissioner account for travel and different things like that. So would you sort of give everybody an overview of if you made some mistakes, if you did, what they were, and then how you've corrected it? Just give everybody an overview of that.
Well, here's what happened. When I got elected Ag Commissioner, guess what? They don't send you to judge school or sheriff school or constable school. They just hand you the keys. This is a $6 billion agency. Good luck. So the first 30 days, I went to scheduled a trip to Oklahoma to meet with the Secretary of Agriculture up there, Jim Reese. Well, that was at the state expense. We got up there, and I had a problem at the airport, and there was a mix-up on the car, and I was an hour late and missed the appointment, and he had to leave town. So I didn't get to make my appointment. So we stayed around there and met with some legislators that they weren't on the schedule. The only thing on the schedule was to meet with the secretary. I returned, and before anyone filed a complaint, before there's any media story, I reimbursed the state for that. Now, there's a group called Progress Texas. It's part of George Soros's group. Made big headlines out of that, and filed a complaint with the Texas Rangers, Rosemary Lindbergh, the Travis County DA. I got investigated by the Rangers and the Travis County DA, and they said, nothing there. We're not even going to indict you. I said, get out of here. Nothing happened. A similar thing happened to a trip the following week, maybe it was 2 weeks later, to Mississippi. I went over there and had 2 meetings with the Secretary of Agriculture. I had another meeting that fell through with the Catfish Institute, Roger Barlow. We weren't able to make that meeting. While I was there, I did have another 2 people brought my horses up to the horse show. They showed them. I paid for all the entry fees and the gas and fuel and all that. No commingling of state funds. But when I got back, as soon as I got back, I reimbursed the state for that trip because the Ag Commissioner over there, which would have been a legitimate trip, you could argue that, but she had a mentor of mine and a campaign contributor, and I thought that just didn't look right, so I'll reimburse the state on that one too. But that didn't keep them from writing a story about it and making a big deal out of it. But,
okay.
I mean, you don't know how you prevent that. But anyway, that was all, and that Travis County DA, keep in mind, that's the same lady that went after Rick Perry and Tom DeLay and everybody else. I mean, it's a miracle that they didn't try to at least indict me. I mean, that was that squeaky clean.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Blocker.
Oh, where to begin? I think I may have mentioned to you all that I'm an ethics attorney, and I've been advising elected officials, including our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, on how to comply with all the campaign finance laws for over a decade. And my opponent, shortly after being elected to office, used state resources to travel to Oklahoma to get a Jesus shot from a convicted felon. He then used state resources to travel to Mississippi to compete in a rodeo. Once he got caught, he decided to reimburse the state. And fact check that for me. There are plenty of articles out there. I want you to look into it deeper. But that's like me robbing a bank. 2 weeks later, I get caught and decide to give the money back to the bank. Does that mean I'm not a bank robber anymore? I don't think so. I think what we've seen here is a pattern of abuse. In addition to these two incidences, which may or may not be excusable, from 2007 to 2017, my opponent has been found guilty of numerous ethical transgressions by the Texas Ethics Commission. This, combined with the other issues, demonstrates a pattern of abuse. In addition to these well-documented stories, and like I said, go to can'ttrustsid.com, and all of them are linked, but he also recently used campaign funds to buy a $40,000 Yukon, right? And I simply don't think that our elected officials should be using state coffers or campaign funds as their personal ATMs. And with regard to the investigation by the Texas Rangers, at the end of the day, they didn't say he was innocent. They said they'd have a hard time proving criminal intent. Fact check that. I think I'm right.
Okay.
Well, I got to respond to that. Basically, what he says is fake news, folks. Didn't happen that way. I reimbursed everything before anybody asked. I'll tell you what's kind of ironic. He is an ethics attorney, and he does advise a lot of Democrats in the House on ethics. One of his clients today was in the newspaper. State Representative Pancho Navarez fined $15,000 for campaign finance violations, and there's his lawyer right there that's advising him on campaign finances. The Tahoe, it was a Tahoe, not a Yukon. Let's get it straight. And it wasn't $40,000. It was a 2016 model. But if y'all notice, I don't travel with an entourage. I don't have a security detail. I don't have an advanced team. I don't even have a driver. I don't even use a state vehicle. And I could. I could do all of that. If you see Paxton or Patrick or Abbott, any of those states, they've all got all these. That's expensive for you, the taxpayer. And I don't do it. Last election, I drove my own pickup in the race, 120,000 miles. I put another 100,000 miles on it since I've been ag commissioner. And upon advice of my ethics attorney.
That's not me, by the way.
No, it's not him. Thank goodness it's not him. She said, you need to quit driving your own vehicle for the state, and you need to quit driving your own vehicle when you're campaigning. You need to buy a campaign vehicle and all the expenses put on there so you're not accused of using, campaign funds to operate your own personal vehicle. So that's what I did. I did that on advice of my, so anyway, I'm saving you a lot of money by not having a driver or a state vehicle or a advanced team or security detail. I mean, it's just me and Smith & Wesson, and that's it.
Okay, Mr. Blocker, since he made an allegation about your legal
Sure.
advice, you may take about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. For around 15 years, I've advised elected officials and candidates on how to comply with all the state's finance laws. Over that duration, 98% of my clients have been Republicans. I've had several Democrats come to me and ask for advice over the years. And look, I'm not going to turn down any politician asking for advice on how to be ethical. Ethical politicians is good for all of us and good for the system. As far as Pancho's concerned, he is not my client, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Probably not now.
Okay, I have one more question before we go to close. Mr. Miller, in your career of when you've had to hire somebody, or if you've had someone that you engaged to take care of very important business, what is the number one character trait that you look for?
Oh, okay. When I hired somebody in that important a position, like my deputy director or my chief legal person, or even my assistant commissioners, what I look for is someone a lot smarter than me. because I don't want to tell them what to do. I need them to tell me what we need to be doing. So I look for the very best person, the most intelligent person that I can find. And I do that in my businesses, too. That's kind of always. I get the very most competent, most intelligent person that I can find. So that's my criteria. They got to be smarter than me.
Okay. Mr. Blocker?
Honesty, integrity. I think that's what we should look for in everybody that we hire for whatever position that it may be.
Okay. Mr. Miller, in your time as a state representative or as an agriculture commissioner, can you think of a mistake that you made that you would, if you had a chance to do it over, you would?
If I think of one, I'll let you know, but I can't think of one.
Okay.
Right now.
Mr. Blocker, in your career, is there any mistake that you've ever made that if you could have a do-over, what would you do?
I would never, ever, ever again go up against Joanne Fleming in a legislative battle.
Okay, we're not supposed to bring the moderator in this, but you did, so okay. Let's get ready for closing remarks, and we're going to have 3 minutes each. So, Mr. Blocker, you went first last time, so Mr. Miller, you get to go first, and you have 3 minutes to close. So I'm going to remind you and remind the audience that you may use this time to close the deal with the audience. Or, if you believe that we've not covered something that's very important to this race, you can cover that. If you've decided that Mr. Blocker just needs to be, taken to the woodshed, you can take your 3 minutes to do that as well. And Mr. Licardi, start the clock.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope you've learned a little something more about the candidates, and it's particularly about me as your ag commissioner and the passion that I have for this job, and the passion I have for agriculture, and the passion I have for protecting the Texas consumer. Those are all important. Here's what I want you to know. We've got some really good people in our camp backing us. Nearly every conservative organization that is endorsed, nearly every Tea Party organization. We have over 100 conservative leaders that have endorsed. And let me just share a few of those with you. Of course, Ted Nugent, my campaign chair and treasurer. Governor Rick Perry. Sheriff Joe Arpaio. If you don't think I'm tough on immigration, just ask him. Y'all remember Joe the plumber? I got the endorsement of Joe the plumber. He's a good guy. I like him. I've got, of course, Tom DeLay. You probably remember him. Norm Newton. Michael Quinn Sullivan, Empower, Texas. Remember, most of us in here know him. Kelly Shackelford. Maybe he's a good guy to have on your team. Jim Elizabeth Graham of Texas Right to Life. Jonathan Sines with Texas Values. Julie White McCarty, who's another leader in the mold of Joanne Fleming up in Tarrant County. Tim Lambert, he heads up the homeschool coalition across the state. We've got all kinds of conservative groups. I've got 2/3. Well, actually, I've got 70% of the state Republican Executive Committee has endorsed my campaign. About 5 former state chairmen have endorsed my campaign. 6 former state vice chairs. 5 present and past RNC members. And all 5 of the past county GOP Chairman's Association. So we run a pretty good company. They can tell. There's a saying that says you can tell a man by the company he keeps. So we're proud to have the endorsement of all those. We'll be announcing this week that I received an endorsement of, and you get to be the ones the first to know that Governor Mike Huckabee is endorsing our campaign, and that we've received the endorsement of the Texas State Rifle Association. And today we were notified that we got endorsed by the National Rifle Association. Two very strong groups here in East Texas. I know y'all cherish your gun rights. So I would ask you to give me another term as your agriculture commissioner. We've got a lot left to do. I didn't get to tell you about everything that I've got planned in the next 4 years as your agriculture commissioner, but I can guarantee you it's good stuff. You're going to like it. We're going to keep doing the good things that we're doing for agriculture, for trade, for production, and protecting the consumers, for rural Texas. We're going to look after your water and rural health care. And I have a saying at the Texas Department of Agriculture: Texas agriculture matters. So God bless each and every one of you coming out tonight. I'll hang around as long as anybody wants to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Blocker.
Thank you very much. I just quickly point out that the vast majority of his endorsements came before I got in this race, and I suspect a lot of them are regretting it at this point. I do want to thank you all for being here and braving the weather to come out. Thank you to Grassroots America, We the People, for hosting the debate. Thank you to my opponent to agreeing to the debate. Most politicians won't do that these days, so he's to be commended for that. You know, a few weeks ago, I was in a feed store, and I was meeting with the owner about my campaign, and he introduced me to an old farmer, and he said, "This is Trey Blocker. He's given up a successful business in Austin to run to be our next ag commissioner." And this old farmer looks at me confused, and he scratches his head, and he says, "Let me get this right, son. You gave up a perfectly good business to become a politician?" And I have to admit, I was a bit stumped initially, but then the answer struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I said, "No, sir, I don't want to be a politician. A politician is someone who, once they get elected or shortly thereafter when they succumb to the allure of the power and the influence and the money, they only have one thing in their mind at that point, and that's getting reelected. Not doing what's right, and not doing what the people sent there to do. So no, sir, I do not want to be a politician. I want to be a servant leader. I want to be a leader who does what is right, who does what the people who send me to Austin sent me there to do, and someone who defends our freedom and our way of life." My opponent is a career politician who has succumbed to the power and the influence and the money of the power structure in Austin. We can no longer trust him to govern conservatively, to be for low taxes and less government, and to protect our freedom. We can't trust him anymore, and it's time to send Sid Miller home. I would greatly appreciate your support. You can learn more about me at treyblocker.com. I'd welcome your emails and your phone calls. And let's all remember, early voting starts February 20th. That's a very short time away. And Election Day is March 6th. And regardless of who you vote for, please go vote. Thank you very much and have a good night. God bless.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. Go ahead and clap. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight in the bad weather, and all of our friends and supporters that are following us on Facebook now that have viewed this, and we will make an archive of this debate available on our website for those who missed it or somebody who wants to go back and look at it. So I would just say that if you gentlemen, after this debate, if you have any information that you've talked about tonight that you would like for us to link to, we are open to getting factual links up on our website for you. Now, I want to remind everybody, it is extremely important for you to get your friends and your neighbors out to vote. The Republican primaries, and that's all we talk about tonight because we want conservative, right? Because in Austin, Texas, we have far too many liberal Republicans. So in the primary is your chance to choose the most constitutional, conservative candidate to represent you. Somebody that you believe will be honest, will be transparent, and that makes sense about the way that they articulate how they want to represent you. So now's your chance. If you wait until November, that ship will have sailed, okay, in many regards across this state. There are some races that will absolutely only be decided in this March primary, and you need to be aware of that. So there are a lot of good organizations across the state, no matter where you live, that have good information on the candidates. So if you are interested in draining any swamp anywhere, you better do your homework on the candidates. Thank you for being here tonight. God bless each of you.